I used to be a hippie. Yeah. I didn't wear shoes for a year. It was a good time of life. I used to hang out with hippies. I did. They're a funny group of people. Freedom, man, they used to say. Don't be controlled by anything. Stick it to the man. I was traveling, backpacking, and dressed like that most of the time. A lot of people tried to sell me marijuana. I was in Namibia, and I was backpacking through Windhoek there. Guy comes up to me. He's like, hey, listen, dude, do you want to buy some weed? We'll hang out, we'll party. I was like, nah, don't do that stuff. He's like, nah, come on. No, it's good. I'm not a cop. It's okay. I was like, nah, listen, I don't do that stuff. I'm not into it. I'm actually studying to be a minister. And he goes, oh, really? Which church? I'm like, oh, I'm with the Seventh-day Adventists. And his response was, oh, I'm an Adventist as well. I think he was just saying it to be nice, but I did ask him if he paid tithe on his sales. I looked like a hippie. I hung out with the hippies. Freedom, just do what you want, we used to say. Don't buy in, don't sell out, don't join the man, don't make any commitments, don't cut your hair, don't wear shoes, don't believe anything, don't work for a living, don't wash. Freedom, they called it. I was only really attracted, though, to the lack of commitment required for that lifestyle. I was kind of cowardly. See, fear of commitment is something that I certainly struggled with, and I still do struggle with. Sometimes when somebody says, listen, hey, Chris, do you want to come over for dinner? You know what I'll say? I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. What I'm saying there is I might get a better offer. And if I commit to you right now, I might not be able to take up that better offer, and I don't want to miss out on that. So it's safer not to make a commitment. I suffer from FOMO, ongoing, perpetually. A consistent fear of missing out. But it only doesn't apply to the smaller commitments in life. Sometimes it even applied to the bigger commitments in my life. Like marriage. Jody, do you want to get married? Oh, of course, honey, I love you. I'm walking down the aisle, and there's this internal dialogue in my own head. And it's going, Chris, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure? Like I even had a choice at that point. The decision wasn't still open. I'm walking down the aisle. And it's not because my wife isn't amazing. She's phenomenal. It was because I was getting freaked out by a lifelong commitment. Or, God. Do you want to commit to God? I am actually the first person to ever go through the theology course at Avondale and begin that pastoral course without being baptized. It was kind of cool. I said, listen, I'm going to go and do theology. I'm going to go study there. And I give them a call, and they're like, okay, yeah, listen, Chris, we'll accept you into the course. When were you baptized? And I was like, oh, actually, I haven't been baptized yet. And they're like, oh, well, that's never happened before. What's going on? I was like, well, I don't know, just thinking about it and stuff, don't want to lock it in too early. Like, Chris, you're studying to be a pastor. Well, yeah, and if I graduate, I know I've got decisions to make, but I just want to kind of keep my options open for as long as I can. Today I want to talk about commitment, but honestly, commitment is scary. And I need to be truthful. The little hippie that still lives in me is already freaking out. Don't sell out to the man. See, commitment can be a real scary deal because making a commitment is a promise about the future. G.K. Chesterton, a dope author from years ago, wrote a fabulous essay. He said, the person who makes a vow or a commitment makes an appointment with him or herself at a future distant time and place. And see, that's what terrifies me. In the future, things might change. What if I promise to marry you, but then you change? I mean, I know we take those vows in sickness or in health, for richer or for poorer. But what if those things change? Because let's be honest, the reasons why you select somebody to marry is if they are healthy and rich. If they're poor and kind of sickly, you don't make that decision. What if I promise to marry you and then you change? Or what if I promise to marry you and then I change? Well, it shouldn't be much of a big deal. What if I promise to be your friend, but then we disagree on something quite deeply? What if I promise to follow God, but then tomorrow I don't feel like following God, or I become uncertain that there even really is a God? What if I commit to the wrong thing? What if I tie myself down to something that I can't get out of? Want to commit to God? I don't know. Want to commit to a relationship? Maybe. Want to commit to a church and join a community? Might keep my options open. Want to commit to serving in unglamorous circumstances and serve the underprivileged people? I don't know, we'll see what happens. See, the way to avoid being tied down, the way to support freedom according to conventional wisdom is to avoid commitment. That's what conventional wisdom says to us. It says, listen, don't buy in, don't lock it down, because if you avoid commitment, then you can be free to eat, to see, to do, to buy, to say, to experience anything you desire. And deep in my heart, I want freedom. I really do. But there's another opinion on freedom, and this is the important one. And it goes like this. Commitment makers and keepers, they will experience a kind of freedom that commitment avoiders will never know. See, it's the people who take a stand, they are the people who will experience a greater freedom than those who don't. We all want to be free, we do. But the problem is we all think that the antonym, the opposite to the word free, is actually the word committed. But freedom, like many things in this world, is actually really counterintuitive. You actually protect freedom by making commitments, by taking a stand. See, it's the commitment maker who gains freedom for love when you choose one person to love for your life. It's the commitment maker who gains freedom for growth and community when they choose faith and meaning in following God. This counterintuitive opinion got expressed a long time ago. Jesus put it like this: if you obey my commands, you are really my disciples, and then you'll know the truth, and truth will set you free. But I tell you, I promise you, those who practice sins, they become slaves to those sins. In other words, if you commit yourself to obedience, that will lead you into a freedom that will allow you to be the person God made you to be. But if you think you are free to do whatever you want, you'll end up being a slave to nothingness, a slave to sin. It looks like this. I have a certain amount of freedom on the piano, but my freedom on the piano only really extends to playing kind of bad love songs and pop songs. You guys who came to Big Camp, played some Justin Bieber. I mean, the musicians around me were excellent, but my freedom on the piano kind of extends to about 4 chords in a row, and that's about it. I mean, sure, I can sit there in my little home with my little piano and play Justin Bieber and cry and sing at the top of my lungs and be like, yeah, man. But I've got to be honest, my freedom on the piano is kind of limited. But there are people on the piano who possess far more freedom than me. There are people on the piano who can play Rachmaninoff. Have you heard of him? He is a gangster of a Russian composer. I mean, his genius and his complexity of the pieces that he plays requires years of practice and dedication. There are people who, when they sit down at the piano, they can produce amazing music of the highest order. I've got to admit, they're probably freer than I am. Sure, they can play Justin Bieber just as well as I can, but they possess a freedom that is beyond mine. Why? Because they made a commitment to practice. Because they made a commitment to understand how the piano works. They made a commitment to dedicating themselves every day to running the chords and the scales and the arpeggios. They know how music works. They've made a commitment, and their freedom is so much beyond mine. So making a commitment, honestly, even though it is hard work, is nothing to be afraid of, because making a commitment in the right spirit, in the right circumstances, to the right things, is one of the most freeing things a human can do. The surgeon who commits themselves to knowing the structures of the human body is far freer than the bloke who's making it up in the kitchen with a steak knife and a vacuum cleaner for suction, watching YouTube instructional videos. The surgeon is freer to heal people because he made a commitment to understanding how the body works. The artist who commits themselves to understanding how line and color and form communicates with the world. The artist who spent years dedicating their practice to producing arts that communicate truth and meaning to the world is far freer than the punk who writes pen 15 on the park bench and walks away giggling. The philosopher who understands contradictions and ideas and epistemology and ontology is far freer than the person who is enslaved to their own viewpoint and thinks that all they need to know can come from a current affair. The athlete who trains every day, the person who dedicates themselves to practicing a sport, who makes that commitment, is far freer than the guy who thinks that 3 minutes with the shake weight on the couch each day is a sufficient workout. See, it's the believer. It's the believer who submits to daily prayer and God and the scriptures. That believer is freer to destroy wickedness in this world than the person who claims to be a Christian, but whose version of prayer is using the Lord's name in vain when they hit themselves with a hammer, and who only go to church if there's Pokemon in there. There better not be a Pokemon gym right here, right now. See, the friend who commits themselves to their 5 friends, who commits to stay by their 5 friends no matter what happens, that person is freer than the person who has 1,000 friends on Facebook but can't find the time to listen to a friend in need. People who take a shower will experience more freedom than unwashed hippies. Freedom to get close to other people without them gagging. The truth is this: those who make the deepest commitments in life, those who take the greatest stands, they end up with the greatest freedom. The people who avoid commitment are cowards. The brave take a stand. I'm going to tell you a Bible story about this. Open your Bibles if you've got them. 1 Kings 19:19. 1 Kings 19:19. So Elijah went from there and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat. He was ploughing with 12 yoke of oxen, and he himself was driving the 12th pair. Elijah went up to him and threw his cloak around him. Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. Let me kiss my mother and father goodbye, the story tells us. 1 Kings 19:19. He said, and then I'll come back and I'll follow you. Go back, Elijah replied. What have I done to you? So Elisha left him and went back. He took his yoke of oxen and slaughtered them. He burned the ploughing equipment to cook the meat and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he set out to follow Elijah and become his servant. It's a great story. There's this very dramatic moment. Elijah is there standing beside the field, and there's these 12 teams of oxen ploughing this field. Elisha's there at the end. Elijah watched these 12 oxen go by, and he comes up to Elisha there at the end, and he takes off his mantle. It's this symbol of his calling, his prophetic work, and he literally throws it onto Elisha. And the meaning is clear. Leave all of this, let it all go, come and be the prophet for Israel. It's a big call. It's a big decision. It's quite funny. In this interchange, there's not many details discussed. Listen, what's it going to be like working as a prophet? I'm going to be working with you. How that's going to work? Is there any salary? Is there any annual leave? Is there any bonuses? If I'm going to be a prophet and you're going to be a prophet at the same time, is there going to be a profit sharing plan? Yeah, bad dad joke for you all there. Details are left out, but what we do know is that Elisha has massive wealth. In those days, 12 teams of oxen, 24 oxen ploughing fields means this guy had wealth beyond belief. He had options, he had freedom, he could have any girl in the village. And then this prophet comes to him and says, leave all of that and attach yourself to a penniless preacher and face a life of opposition and danger. Leave all of that. But what if something better comes along? And listen, let's be honest, something better will come along. He's got 12 teams of oxen. And yet he says yes. And then he says, listen, I've got one request though. Let me go back and kiss my mother and father. It's kind of a reasonable response. You're about to disappear. Bye, mum and dad. But Elijah gives him this kind of curt response. Seems a little edgy. He goes, go ahead. What have I done to you? It's quite interesting. You can kind of hear the wheels turning in Elijah's mind. You know, I bet you if he goes home to mum and dad, they'll remind him of the trust fund. They'll remind him of the keys to the car and the vacation home, and he will bail and I will never see him again. But I love what Elijah does. He does something really important. He says, listen, Elisha, no, I'm going to give you the space to make this decision. I'm not going to pressure you into this commitment. You need to think about it for yourself. You must decide. And a good church will always do that. Listen, we don't want to press you into commitments. We want you to decide for yourself. And so Elisha goes back and he says goodbye to his parents, and then he comes back to Elijah and he says, listen, there is one more thing that I need to do. One more thing, and I love this. He took the oxen and slaughtered them. He burned the plowing equipment to cook the meat. And he took the meat and he gave it to the people, and they ate. And then he set out to follow Elijah and become his servant. John Ortberg, a great preacher, he points this out. He says, listen, he burns the plow. Do you see what's happened here? He comes back to Elijah and he's all in. So he kills the oxen, and the oxen don't like this part of the story. But the point is here, as he kills the oxen, that he's going to offer a sacrifice to God that expresses that he is really offering his life as a sacrifice. And then he turns that sacrifice into a party for everyone. Do you know how much meat there is in 12 teams of oxen? I don't know either. I'm a vegetarian and I don't want to know. But for this commitment, Elisha does something very, very smart. He goes public with it big time. He kisses his parents goodbye, and then he does this one last thing. He burns the plow. It is a very smart move. It means there's no turning back. It means I can't return to my old life. I've burned the plow. Because he's going to need to have that level of commitment, that level of buy-in, because it's going to get tough for him. When Elijah finally leaves Elisha, and he's all by himself, he's a prophet by himself, he knows that he can't go back because he's burned the plow. When a bunch of boys come and mock him, which they will, and he calls bears out of the forest to chase them and maul them, he's that angry at them. He thinks, listen, I'll never be a man of God. I really shouldn't be a prophet. But he knows he can't go back. He's burnt the plow. When the king wants to kill him, he can't go back. He's burned the plow. When the Arameans surround him and they're going to kill him and his entire people, he can't go back. He's burned the plow. When famine is starving him, when Israel rejects him so utterly that he weeps at his failure, the one thing he knows is, listen, I can't go back. I've burned the plow. There's no retreat. That's commitment. That is plow burning commitment. That is freedom. That is immense freedom. And because of his commitments, because he burned the plow, he led an entire nation into deeper freedom because he made a good commitment. In 1519, a conquistador landed in Veracruz in Mexico to win glory for the Spaniards. Cortez came to Mexico from Spain with 500 soldiers, 100 sailors on 11 ships. And when they landed, the soldiers were filled with uncertainty and fear because they were facing the Aztecs, fierce warriors. And these soldiers said, listen, we might not win here. We should probably return. And Cortez, what's he do? When he sees that his soldiers are interested in returning, he burns the ships. This is the truth of what he's saying. In other words, men, we can't turn back. There's no escape clause. We are here and we succeed or we die. We flourish or we perish, but we've made a commitment and we're not going back. Now this story, it gets spread around a lot. It's kind of a motivational speaker's sort of story. And because we're a church, the truth is important to us. There's a few details on that story that have kind of gotten a little out of hand as it's been told through the centuries. First of all, he didn't actually burn the ships, he scuttled the ships, he sunk them. But most importantly, he actually left one ship intact. That was for himself and some treasure to return to Spain if he needed it. Soldiers, you can't go back. I'm going to keep one for myself. That should be okay. Cortez has these soldiers who are committed, and they fight well. But they also do awful things to the people in the New World. And I tell you a story because it's important not to simply glorify commitment in of itself. If commitment is to the wrong thing, it can do a lot of damage. Ultimate commitment to a non-ultimate thing is idolatry. But when a human being makes an outrageous commitment to a noble calling of a supremely worthy God, when an ordinary being, an ordinary human says, I don't care how hard it gets, I don't care what it costs, I am not going back, I have slow roasted the ox on the plow, I have given up the trust fund, I have kissed the parents goodbye, the ships are smoking in the harbor, I have burned the plow. When that happens, a freedom gets released on this earth that is beyond mere human capacity. So kids, church, youth, teens, where is God asking you to burn the plow? Where is God asking you to come to immense levels of freedom? Rachmaninoff levels of freedom. Surgical levels of freedom. Freedom to be a missionary, freedom to go on Storm Cove, freedom to overthrow the broken systems of this world, freedom to create loving relationships that are legendary. Speaking of legendary relationships, when my wife and I got married, yeah. When we got married, we actually didn't get any premarital counseling. It was a bit of a mess up. Jody and I, we went and we did this test. It was this test and it looked at various aspects of our relationship. And we actually aced the test. I think it was because Jody was observant, and I think it was because I was cheating. I was like, that looks like the right answer. That looks like the right answer. We took this test back to the counselor, the psychologist who was seeing, and he said, listen, great results. Nothing we can do here. Go get married. No premarital counseling. No heads up on money, sex, conflict, in-laws, parenting, goals, division of labor, expectations. None of that. I went to Jody's brother-in-law. I was like, hey, listen, I need to know a bit about marriage. We're doing it. What have you got for me? And he asked me this question. What will you do if you wake up in the morning and you don't feel like you're in love that day? It kind of shocked me. I was like, dude, what's wrong with your relationship? What's wrong with your marriage? Because I thought, listen, we are so special, and Jody and I are so magic, and my hair is so amazing all of the time, that these feelings of love could never go away. It's true they might for ordinary people, maybe for you, Adam, but never for us. They will grow more magic and more special every day. But here's the truth. By honoring our commitment in marriage, it allows us to keep loving each other. And deeper feelings of love grow and freedoms emerge that can't be found unless the plow is burnt, unless you go all in. Honoring my commitment in marriage doesn't mean I'm going to be a martyr. I'm going to sit here with my teeth gritted and just endure my wife. No. It's 1,000 little commitments that are powered by God. I will listen. I will give. I will disagree honestly. I'll make up. I won't go flirting in a bar. I won't go escaping in a television show when there's conflict or a bottle, because I made a promise for better or worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness, in health. I've burned the plow. I'm all in. See, church, it is not in your avoidance of decisions, but in your commitments that you find yourself. So who are you? By the commitments that you made, who are you? I love the fact that I can stand here today and I can say, I am the one who has committed myself to Jody and our gorgeous little squishy daughter, Adeline. I am the one who has committed myself to my work and my ministry and my friends and my God and my Lord Jesus. And listen, I am so much freer than I could have ever imagined when I was hanging out as a hippie. So much freer, I might even grow my hair back. That was awesome. So church, where is God calling you to burn the plow? Perhaps it could be to commit to your relationship in marriage. Unless, of course, you're under 18 years of old. God is 18 years of age. God is definitely not calling you to get married today. But where is God calling you to burn the plow? It could be in a chosen direction of study, because the longer you practice in a certain field, the more freedom you can find in it. Perhaps it's time that you surrender to God, because the longer you practice submission to God, the greater your freedom becomes in faith and kindness and beauty in love. Maybe it's time to burn the plow there. It could be in friendships. Maybe it's time to burn the plow and say, listen, I'm going to commit to these friendships. I'm going to learn what it actually takes to be a true friend. I'm going to work out how to like people and make people like me despite years of disagreement or distance. I'm going to commit myself to these friendships. Or maybe it's time to consider your commitment to your parents. Maybe it's time to commit to loving them no matter what. Maybe it's time to commit to being in this world in a certain way that says, listen, I will not exploit people. I need to burn the plow. I need to live in a different way. Or maybe it's time to commit your life in the form of baptism. Maybe you need to burn the plow and step in and accept the freedom that can come from a good commitment. I know, though, as we're talking about these ideas, as we're talking about commitment, you might be thinking, listen, Chris, great sermon, and I hope you are thinking that, but as I preach, all I can think about is all the commitments that I've broken. Chris, I know you're talking about commitments, but the truth is my life is just a train wreck of broken commitments. I've tried making commitments and none of them really stick. I get that. We all wrestle with that. We all wrestle with making commitments. But here's the deal with commitment. If I blow off a commitment on Sunday, I begin again on Monday. If I blow off a vow that I've made at 10 a.m., I begin again at 10:01 because of something called grace. Because our God is a commitment-keeping God, and when we fail and when we fall down and when we don't keep our commitments to Him, He keeps His commitment to us all the more. Even to the point where at the cross where Jesus died. See, the big commitment, the ultimate commitment that a human being can make, the one that is worthy of your life and death, is your commitment to love and follow Jesus. Jesus, who is infinitely more committed to you. Honestly, I pray that you commit to Jesus. Because Jesus came to earth, and I promise you nothing better is coming along. In the 2,000 years since Jesus came, nothing better is coming along to follow. Jesus is so humble that if a better way came along, He would be the first to say, take it. But it hasn't come along. I've read the Bhagavad Gita, I've read the Quran, I've looked at the philosophers, I know the alternative views of way you can live in this world, but I can tell you there is nothing better than Jesus to commit your life to. In 2,000 years, nothing better has come along, and I can tell you the truth, it's not coming tomorrow either. So what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Church, it's time to burn the plow. It's time to make a commitment and find yourselves living in freedom that you never imagined possible. For all the geniuses out there, since you are all geniuses, I'm going to drop the mic on this sermon with a poem. G.K. Chesterton, the guy who I quoted earlier. Check out this quote. I love it. There is an announcement. There is a call that is being made. All around us is this city of small sins, abounding in backways and retreats. There's this city, there's this surrounding culture of people who are commitment phobic. There's this surrounding culture of people who are escaping. They're taking the back routes. They're getting out. They're not standing for anything. But he says, but surely, sooner or later, a towering flame is going to rise from the harbor, announcing that the reign of the cowards is over because a man there is burning his ships. What a poem. Church, burn the plow, go all in, make a commitment, find some freedom.